show I've worked on is called Mom, which was for CBS, but I think it was also on here. So nice to meet you. Probably for all of us who worked on that show, there was a little of us in all of them, and vice versa. So the neurotic part of myself, right into Ross, the person, I can't stop making jokes. That part of me is Chandler, the control freak of me. Part of me is of course Monica. I think the only way to have survived on that show as a writer, because it was a very intense experience, is to be able to write for all of them. To have friends like that, and you aspire to have those kind of crazy adventures that you only have time to have before you're married, before you have your own kids. And then when you're older, it also works really well because it reminds you of sort of a magical time in your life when you weren't really a kid yourself anymore, but you also weren't an adult yet, and you hadn't sort of settled down and got married and had kids and had maybe the job that you have for the rest of your life and figured out what you wanted to do for the rest of your life. So I think it works in both directions, which was an accident, which was lucky. I always say it's easier for dramas to travel than comedy, because when somebody gets murdered, we know that the murder needs to be solved. It doesn't matter where you come from in the world. But comedies usually require more culturally specific knowledge. And I think what we stumbled onto with Friends and my bosses, Marta Kaufman and David Crane, who created the show, realized was that there is this sort of universal time in your life when you're no longer a kid, but you're not quite an adult. And they wanted to write about that time because it was a very special time for them. They lived in New York together, they hung out with their friends all the time, and they wanted to sort of revisit that. And I don't think they fully realized how universal it was. But I think the fact that they tapped into an experience that everyone has in almost every culture, certainly not every culture, but in not every culture, I suppose you truly leave home before you create your own home. But it's those sort of universal connections that make something last. I always say, and I worked on some of those shows, there was a period of time where everybody tried to copy Friends, and what I realized ultimately is the next Friends is never going to be Friends. The next Friends, you might say, is maybe The Office or Modern Family or one of those other ensemble shows that works, again, is like connects you to this sort of universal time in your life that everyone can relate to. But for us on that show, we were really lucky. It was only my second job, and I got hired because I was the same age as the characters. I was 23 when I started on that show. And so we would just come in every day. I lived in a 3-bedroom apartment with 5 people and a dog. So I lived in a more realistic version of Monica's apartment. And we just came in every day and told the stories of what had happened to us. And then obviously we would exaggerate them for comic effect, and we would add to them and so on and so forth. But it was like one of my best friends just happens to be very much like Joey, and I stole an incredible amount of material from my friend Tony, and we put it right into Joey. I'm from New Jersey, he's from New Jersey, Joey, we always said was from New York, but it's essentially the same part of the world. So we all knew people who were like that, and we were the same age, so we just stole from our own lives and our friends as much as possible. And I think that's what made it feel authentic. Writers' rooms are that they're smaller because episode counts are smaller. When we did Friends, the first year we did 22 episodes. The second year we did 23 or 24, and we went as high as 26 episodes a year. We started out with 8 of us, including Marta and David, who created it. And by the time I left in season 6, there were 14 of us. Because we were doing so many episodes and so much rewriting, which I'm going to talk about in the panel, but we would stay up all night. And because we knew no better, and we were very young, and we didn't care, we just wanted it to be as good as possible. Let me go back to your original question, which was, oh yeah, thank you so much. What am I working on now? I'm writing a pilot for Fox, which is a workplace comedy. It's what we would call a mock doc in the documentary style, kind of like The Office. I would love to be as successful as The Office. But it's going to star Ken Jeong from The Hangover. And it's set in a congressional district office, meaning he plays a congressman, but it's not set in Washington, it's set in the home office, where the staff really exists just to help people. They're not concerned with power and privilege, only Ken is. And that's kind of the joke. And then the other thing is I'm working on a Christmas rom-com for Chris Columbus to direct. Even before I was hired right after the pilot. So Rachel's journey of giving up the easy life, or some would say the easy life, where she wouldn't have to work or struggle and everything was sort of decided for her. That was in the DNA of the show. And Rachel was our kind of eyes in to this new world, a fictionalized version of what I think most people go through, which is sort of struggling in your 20s. Obviously their apartments were much nicer than the ones we all lived in our 20s. But the idea that they were figuring out their lives, not taking an easy choice, trying to figure out how they could be the best versions of themselves and sort of follow their bliss, so to speak, to quote Joseph Campbell. I think that was absolutely in the DNA of the show from moment one. It kept as it is, but if it happened, I would want to work on it. I think probably it should be kept as it is because, like we've been saying, it's really about such a specific time in your life. If you were to reboot it, it couldn't be a continuation of the same show. It would be much more in the territory of other shows like Modern Family, which have done it brilliantly. So it wouldn't be its own specific sort of diamond anymore. You would have to sort of be in familiar territory, and I think that's why Marta and David have always resisted it, even though, of course, it's very tempting. I would love to know what all those characters are up to now, and it would be fun to see them. And I think certainly people have probably talked about it over dinner, but when it would come time to actually pull the trigger, Marta and David are pretty clear about not wanting to do it. Get some sleep, be one. Why are you staying up so late? You're insane. I think that the Adam of today is amazed at the Adam from then. We just cared so much and we tried so hard, and I don't regret it at all. But as I've gotten older, and I got married and I had children, it would be impossible to live that life again. So I think I might have to talk with myself about the wisdom of time management, because we really would work 14, 16, 18-hour days almost every day. And it's very difficult to have any kind of personal life and work like that. And yet, I don't regret it because here I am all these years later talking to you about it, and that's such a gift. So I wouldn't tell myself not to do it, but I might try to tell myself to have a little more of a work-life balance. Team Ross, because she explicitly said they were on a break. It really seemed like they were broken up. And then the way we wrote it, we tilted it towards him because he didn't want to go to the club. He got dragged there. He was drunk. And then the girl who he ends up sleeping with really pursued him. He didn't pursue her. That being said, now that I'm older, I have completely switched. He's an idiot. They were clearly in love with each other. He could have waited a couple of weeks. And I think Yes, so I've switched. I think when you find the real thing, and obviously the way we wrote it, they were the real thing. They were our Romeo and Juliet. They were supposed to be together. He really should have waited. He should have just gone home. He should have never gone out. But you know, that's what good drama is. You want people to make stupid choices, and if he didn't make that choice, even though we tried to make him less of a jerk by taking a little bit of his agency away, he was dragged to the club, he was drunk, he didn't pursue the girl, she pursued him, he still said yes. But what's good about that is we could then argue about it for the next 7 years. And we would never get to say, we're on a break, which we just would used to put that in the script as much as we possibly could because David Schwimmer would say it in a different way every time. And we'd always say it with such intensity that even though we heard it 11,000 times, it was always so funny and it was such a great sore spot between them. It gave us a lot of story. So yes, I've switched teams, but I'm still glad we did it because it gave us so much material.